In today's video, I'm going to talk about cold air intakes and why you should get one. So the question is does a cold air intake work? Well, in theory, it does. Cold air is more dense than hot air, and if you're getting fresh air instead of this engine bay header heat, in theory, it should be working a lot better. It should be able to get more air, more dense air. There's actually I don't know if it was a YouTuber or somebody on a Miata forum page that talked about their turbocharged Miata. It had 350 horsepower, and when they were running it, every time it had dropped about 10 horsepower each pull because it just got heat soaked. It was at 350, then the next pull 340, and then it was 330. Then they stopped, let it get back to temp, and then they did it again. It went back to 350. So heat soak is a real problem with these Miatas. There's no real way to get out. You can do the fins on the hood or the cutouts so that it can extract air. As the air flows over it, it's not necessarily like a ram intake where it sucks down air into the engine bay. What it really is it's an extracting. So when the air goes over those grills, it pulls the air through the radiator a little bit better. So in theory, it helps more with radiator cooling as well as pulling out some of that extra heat from the engine bay. But it's still gonna be pretty hot. That's not its whole purpose. It's more of just kind of helping with that radiator to work well. For a real cold air intake, you need to have that access to cold air, which is why I chose to do this one. There's this option as well as the other option where you can locate it before the radiator here and 3D print off the piece. But again, I don't have that available. I might do that later down the line, but we'll see. Yeah, so ideally you want to get something that actually pulls cold air. You need to actually have cold air being fed into your cold air intake for it to be considered a cold air intake. You can't just put a cone on it and it can't choose whether it's hot or cold. Another comment that people have made on the internet is whether or not the intake makes a growl with a bigger intake. That's true. But you have to think about the acoustics and how things work. If people redirect their snorkel to be right here by the cowl, you're going to hear it because it's pointing outside of the engine bay. You can have that same kind of growl if you just take off that snorkel and have it just suck in air right next to the headers. But again, that's not what you want. You'd rather have performance over sound. But if you can get performance and sound, those are two pluses in my book. So there's a YouTuber, I'm not exactly sure, or at least remember his name, but he did a test between stock air filters as well as a better aftermarket free-flowing filter and then a high-performance K&N air filter. And he was able to get about 4 to 5 horsepower from the stock filter to the K&N filter. I believe he drove a Subaru Outback, so it had about 160 horsepower initially, and then dynoing it at the end, he had 164. So these air filters are better, but it brings to question, is it actually filtering as much as these other air filters? Really, that's up to you whether you would prefer to have that or more performance. I don't think it'll be that much of an issue because a lot of cars have, more free-flowing air filters. The stock one inside of here is just kind of like a paper air filter. It's almost like a furnace air filter inside of a home, but I'll show you an example of what this K&N filter is. This specific one is a reusable engine air filter. It's a K&N performance air filter. But yeah, you can get these ones online. You can go to any auto parts store and usually they'll have them. But this is just a drop-in piece into the airbox. So if you plan on keeping your engine bay stock or at least keeping it similar, that's a good option. So we'll do some test runs on the difference between the OEM air filter as well as this K&N performance air filter. Now, the real reason why I personally wanted to do this is because of heat soak. When I drive in the summer up in the canyon, the Miata engine bay gets extremely hot. And something that I noticed is as I was trying to drive around, it would kind of bog because it was just trying to suck in this air, but it's just really hot and it just kept getting worse and worse. So my goal is to be able to have this running well regardless of the engine bay heat. Having this intake on this side should prevent it from drawing any hot air inside of the engine bay. There might be a little bit, but of course it's going to be a lot better than it pulling it from right here inside the engine bay. Originally it pointed out to right here and then the snorkel stopped right here. Yeah, it's not facing towards the headers, but you know, in this small area of volume, there's going to be heat, there's going to be hot air that's getting over here. There's no real exit for that heat other than kind of the slits right here, but it's going to pull more air from this than it is from outside. So that's why I redirected this and created this. So we'll do a test run and see those. Okay. All right, let me talk about this. So what I did is I went to O'Reilly's and I just went to their intake section, and they had this Spectre Performance. You don't necessarily have to get this one. You can also get something that's a little bit better than these ribbed ridges, because that could cause a little bit of turbulence with the air, but again, I think it's going to be a little bit more airflow than the stock snorkel, as well as more cold air. So we'll be having that, but then you have to attach this 3-inch to the 2.5-inch intake where the air box is. The air box snorkel connects, and it's only 2.5 inches. As well as I ended up using a 2.5 drill bit to cut that hole here. So they have a 2.5 to 3-inch adapter, which works perfectly. So it's not going to be coming off or falling out anytime soon. I've been hitting it, and it's pretty strong, pretty thick. So I don't think it will melt either, but that's my job to figure it out, and so you don't have to. So let's go for a ride and let's see the differences between the three. The OEM, we'll say OEM Plus, and then we'll say Modified. So now we are in the Modified situation. With the OEM Plus, we're both agreeing that we felt like it could be an upgrade. We felt like it was either placebo or it was something, but I've actually driven this already with the reroute, and I'd have to say it's made a difference. So I don't know if you've seen in the other videos, I do have an exhaust cutout, and while we'll test this, we'll see if the exhaust cutout helps with that as well. If it doesn't, hey, the loud part is the fun part. So not everything's about speed with this car, because it takes a lot of work to get this car to be fast, but it's really easy to have fun in this car. So one thing that I've already noticed is that when the intake is under load, or when you push, when you open up the throttle, it kind of has that growl that everybody talks about. That could be due to the snorkel being faced towards us, or it might be because it's actually getting that extra free flow. There's probably a couple different things, but one thing that is kind of funny with this snorkel is it's circular, while the original intake was more of an oval shape kind of thing. So when it actually is sitting and idling, it's basically doing the same thing as what a marimba would do. It has a tone, and it just kind of sounds like "oh" as it's sitting there. But let me see if you can maybe hear what it sounds like when it's under load. There's definitely a lot more mid-range torque, whereas before I felt like anywhere before 4,000 RPM was hard for the car to kind of pick up and go. But now there's enough torque to kind of throw your head back a little bit, not crazy, but definitely a lot more than before. In conclusion, do I think this is worth it? I would say absolutely. Whether the performance actually made a difference, I don't know the exact time yet. I'm gonna go in and edit and make sure and see what the results really were. I felt like it was faster and I enjoyed the sound that was coming from it, and I don't think there's any cons to drawing more fresh air instead of the engine bay exhaust heat side. So should you do it? I mean, for the price, this is cheaper than any of those other cold air intakes online. This ended up only being about $100 in total, give or take. You could even find cheaper alternatives. For what it is and for what you have to do, it wasn't that hard to really do. I say do it. As long as it's really pulling cold air, that's the main key factor. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully this will inspire some of you, or at least save you some time and money.